regular meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. Today is Tuesday, the first Tuesday in December, the 6th, year 2022, and it is 6 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time. First, we'll invite you to stand and join us in an invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight, our invocation will be led by Pastor Brian Haynes from the Family Bible Church.
All right, please join me. God, we come tonight and we thank you for the servants who are in this room tonight. Pray that you would give them wisdom as they work their way through tonight's agenda. God, we also pray your blessing, protection, and your grace over our first responders, our EMS, our fire, our police department. Pray that you would continue to watch over them and keep them safe as they serve our community. And God, as we meet tonight, we pray that you would give grace in our conversations. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Haynes. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So tonight's meeting will be both a physical meeting location and a virtual meeting. Tonight's meeting may be viewed live on YouTube, on Facebook, and on cable channel 10 HD 1090. City staff are participating both in person and via teleconference. Guests that are included in staff presentations will be excused from the Ring Central meeting at the conclusion of the agenda as appropriate. So I would normally turn to our city clerk, Julie, for a roll call at this time, but I believe we have all council present. So we'll just move along then to item number 1 on our agenda. Are there any suggested changes to the agenda item this evening? Seeing none, the agenda will be approved as presented. We won't need a motion for that. We'll then go immediately then to our item number 2, which tonight is Boy Scout Troop number 4059, and I believe they've got a Christmas wreath to present. I'd like to welcome representatives from Boy Scout Troop 4059 and Scoutmaster to please come forward and please introduce yourselves.
All right. I'm Matthew Garston. I'm the Senior Patrol Leader of Troop 4059. I've been the Senior Patrol Leader for a year now. Troop 4059 has been making wreaths every year as a fundraiser since the early 1950s, so it's been going on for a while, and part of tradition is every year we bring the city a wreath of their own. This year, Troop 4059 has done a lot of activities to benefit the community, but they've also gone on multiple camping trips, including Scout Camp at Camp Meriwether near Tillamook, Oregon. And while they were there, we received the Honor Patrol, honor for 2 of our patrols. We brought 2. And we also received Honor Troop. We've done multiple hikes over the past couple months, including Parkview Lookout, and have gone to many events, including Wash Jam. And Troop, we meet every Tuesday at Scout Hall, which is right down the road. And we are very active in the community with service projects and other activities. So this is Troop 59, presenting the wreath.
Thank you very much and welcome. Hopefully we can bring the wreath forward here, and I'll invite City Council to come down and join me in accepting this wreath, and we'll get a picture. Okay?
Squish in. Yeah, they can go behind and stand.
They can go behind too.
Scouts go behind. So Chris isn't by himself. Scoot over, guys. Get a little closer. It's okay, Faye. There we go. Awesome.
Yep, I'm staying.
He's got a merit badge to work on, so he'll be staying.
Thank you, Troop 4059, all members and all Scoutmasters. Thank you. Okay, I think at this time, we will move to the citizen comment period. Citizens may comment on subjects of interest not listed on the agenda or items listed on the consent agenda. Citizens may also comment on corresponding agenda items. There are many ways to contact staff and city council, all of which are posted here at this time. Citizens may also visit our website for methods to submit public comment or contact the city clerk, Julie Nestor, by phone or email as noted here. When submitting comments, please include your name and address. Public comments sent anonymously will be shared with the mayor and council but will not be displayed. We received 2 comments from the public since our last regular meeting, which are displayed here at this time. And then we will, as soon as we're done reading those, we'll give the public who are here tonight a chance to speak. Okay, at this time, we'll turn to our public that are present who wish to speak to items not listed on the agenda or on the consent agenda. And then the clerk has a list, and we'll give anybody at the end of that time that hasn't or that didn't sign up on the list, give them an opportunity also. So,
Thank you, Mayor. Richard Nash.
Richard Nash, 3366 Green Road, Oak Harbor, Washington, resident of Oak Harbor for 50 years. I'm talking about AOC, the sculpture called Angel of Creativity and the location. Because of the cultural benefits of public art, many smaller communities like Anacortes, LaConner, Friday Harbor, and Mount Vernon have been incorporating public art into their cities. Oak Harbor has been making progress in this area. The Angel of Creativity by Sebastian is a signature piece of sculpture that will add gravitas to the Oak Harbor collection. The obvious benefits for Oak Harbor are regional and global recognition, the beneficiary of regional media attention, the opportunity to become a sister city with Dublin, Ireland, who also shares a large Sebastian sculpture, and public educational opportunities. Before Drake's passing in August of 2020, he decided to gift the $500,000 sculpture to our city. S&W has worked in partnership with city officials as well as Parks Department, Engineering Department, Permits Department, and Arts Commission, and the last iteration of the City Council, all very helpful and overall positive about the project. S&W has covered all the monetary costs to date. AOC celebrates the creativity of humans. It is not a religious icon. It does not interfere with a future windmill project. The new site is at the extreme west side of Windjammer, not in the center, and it is now, the sculpture is now a shade of white. It is 37 feet in height, as tall as a tall utility pole. AOC was introduced to the city administration in 2019. There were exploratory meetings with the Parks Department and the Arts Commission, plus meetings with council where S&W attempted to correct a series of inaccuracies entering into the public domain. Fast forward to the City Council meeting of 9/7/21, the AOC project was given the green light with conditions laid out to the city's PSA. Both the gifting agreement and PSA were signed before 2022. With all of this in place, S&W officials continue to move forward with the PSA requirements. S&W provided numerous communiques with the city, 8 progress reports to keep the council and city council up to date and help maintain a positive atmosphere. This included reports at the current site with a city official, S&W members, Parks Commission officials, and occasionally a council member and a RAM construction project manager. All the geotechnical engineering and the structural engineering for the installation have been reviewed and approved by the city and paid in full by the S&W Drake Estate. And a bonus, the property owner who owns next to it is Debbie Skinner, and she supports the sculpture installation there. And if Flintstone Park is arbitrarily selected as being suggested, all the steps for the current site will need to be repeated with the addition of a 200-foot ecological high tide setback involving the state, increasing costs and adding months of time. All public art has its critiques based primarily on subjective criticism. Those of us who have dedicated much of our lives to the visual arts do not take the commitment lightly. It is important that the world-class sculpture be located in an area for maximum viewing near the water. We understand that AOC will always have its critics and supporters. It is our hope that this incredible opportunity will be embraced by the city and acknowledged for the special gift that it is. Okay. And I won't be around for questions, so if you have any, you can ask them now.
Thank you, Mr. Nash.
Mayor, next is Dawn Cecil.
Well, lucky for me and for you, Richard said everything I was going to say and quite a bit more. What I think I'll do instead is write each and every one of you a letter that goes into some of my concerns, and I'll make the letter brief, and I'll keep my remarks brief here. Contract was let by the city. It involved a lot of compromise on both sides, and each side didn't get everything that it wanted, but I think both sides got a lot. That's what my letter will be about. And I'm, for one, I'm perfectly happy with the compromises that were made. It wasn't the site I would have chosen, but I think we have a darn good site in the contract that the city signed and the council signed off on. Everyone is met. We're in the process of meeting the requirements of that contract. I don't see why we couldn't go forward with what we have. My letter will address what I've been hearing through the grapevine, that another site that wasn't considered or talked about when the council agreed to the current site that's been selected. Another site has emerged as a possibility here. Well, as I said, nobody gets everything in terms of compromise. You get what you can, and I think both sides have gotten a great deal. As Richard said, the color of the sculpture has changed. It's been painted. It's not the color it was before, which some people objected to. And I think it's going to be a magnificent addition to somewhere in the city, and I hope it will be on the edge of the park. I know some of you have constituents, quite a few constituents, who are worried about, who don't want it in the park at all. Well, you heard what Richard said, it's barely in the park, it's on the extreme edge of it, and the woman who lives on the other side of that edge is quite enthusiastic to have the sculpture. So if you would, given the contract that you've already green-lighted and the city has already signed, and all the money that's already been expended by Sculpture Northwest that the city doesn't have to expend because everything is being donated by Sculpture Northwest, I think you've got a good deal going as things are right now. But I have more to say on that, and I'll save it for that letter that you will all be getting very shortly. Thank you.
Mayor, next is Cynthia Mason.
Hi, everybody. I'm here to share a little bit of good news. I am wearing my Oak Harbor Music Festival hat tonight. I had hoped to make your last meeting, but it wasn't possible. For about 2 years, the festival has been a member of a organization called Washington Festivals and Events Association, which is a membership-driven organization statewide. It's about 400 members large, and it includes everything there is to do about events and planning, including our very large events, Safeco Field, Eastern Washington 3-on-3 matches in Spokane, Pig Out in the Park. Anyway, they have a conference, 3-day conference, and they end with what they refer to as Summit Awards. And I decided to throw our hat in the ring this year, unbeknownst to the board, but I was able to attend the event with Larry Mason and surprised him with 2 awards we came home with. So I'd like to, Mayor, present you with the first one. We were recognized, and these are judged categories, if you would. The first one is awarded to us for our volunteer program, which I couldn't be more proud of because it takes our volunteers to make it happen. So, Mayor, I hope you find the right place for this in your office to display. And then just taking advantage of our audience up here, the second we were recognized in was for newspaper and tabloid, and what was submitted was a Whidbey Weekly issue with a paid ad on the front and an interview done by Kathy Reed. So Eric, please bring this back to your team. Let's share it with you. We'll keep going for the big one. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Mayor, that concludes those that had wished to sign up on the list in advance.
Thank you, Clerk Julie. Are there any other members of the public present who wish to speak to items not listed on the agenda? If so, please stand and join us. Okay, doesn't look like it. We will then close the citizen comment period at this time and move to item number 4 on our agenda, which is our consent agenda. Staff has presented the listed consent, all of which were included in your packet. If there are no objections or changes to the consent agenda, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
I wouldn't say that we would necessarily need to pull item D off, but I would like to hear an update from staff on it if we could.
On which item is this?
Item D.
Item D, okay. Any other okay, seeing no other, yes, Councilor Muntz.
I would like to make a comment for item D.
Okay, so the other items will be approved as presented, okay? So then first off, we had a question to staff, and then Councilor Muntz. What was that? What's the question again?
Yeah, I was just hopeful that staff could give us an update on this, kind of explain it.
Are you referring to item D? Correct. I think legislative priorities, Sabrina's ready to provide a presentation on that if it got pulled off. So Sabrina Combs, our communications IT manager, is ready to provide
So we
a
can
presentation.
start with the question if you want, or I can just roll through, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to see what you had on it, and I think Councilmember Munns had a question, I think.
Go ahead.
Mayor, no, I have no question. I just want to be sure we send it as soon as we approve it to AWC. Even though we may not always have everything they have or what we have they have, but they will be very strong advocates for us by having that list early, and to keep it on their agenda, because as they start educating our legislators, then they will look to list of other cities that have sent in to see if they can add on or say, have you seen it? So I just want to be sure we send it to AWC, please.
That is definitely the plan. In the presentation tonight, what I was just going to show is that for the approval, I don't know if the clicker likes me today. Tim, a little assist, can you just go one slide down? Yeah, thank you. So just to recap, this is the legislative priorities piece. We kept the items the same based on the conversation that we had at the workshop. Didn't really make any changes, I just fine-tuned some of the layout. And then as we go to the next slide, we also created one of the pieces that will outline what it will look like when we are actually talking to legislators about a specific project. So with this request, this would be a funding request that we're sending off, and we have 3 others that are in process with different staff members, as I talked about, that we're working on. And so the goal is to get off the generic list that we have, that's sort of the overview, broad scope of what we want to do, and then have these individual pieces that will outline specific projects as they come up. We will also make these available on the city website, as well as sending them out to legislative individuals so that we can contact them and talk to them about those specific projects. We'll also make them available to you as council members. So with that, next slide. Technical difficulties. So as I said, we'll be sending those out, and then the next slide just talks about the individual pieces, and then the motion to approve the resolution and adopt the 2023 legislative priorities. So if you have any more questions, let me know.
Okay. Yes, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Sabrina, thanks for all the work you did on this. The work that staff has done has really helped the mayor and council really get the attention of our legislators. And I know they're eagerly awaiting this. So thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, love that second piece. Right, that's a message that we need to deliver and deliver often to get the attention I think we're going to need there. But that's going to be a big thing for our ratepayers if we can get some traction on that down in Olympia. And I love the look of it, and just it's something that I think we're going to get them to read. And now it's going to be our challenge just to place it in front of them as many times as we can. Thank you.
Yes, and kudos to staff because they're bringing ideas for different topics and projects that we're working on that we can start including in those types of pieces.
Okay, so we will need a motion to approve the resolution since we pulled it off. Yes, Councilor Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the resolution number 2227 adopting 2023 legislative priorities.
Okay, you've got a motion and a second. A motion by Councilor Marshall, second by Councilor Munns that is exactly like the recommended action. With no additional questions or input, I'll ask for the council to signify their approval by raising their right hand. Okay, and that passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good steal why those two were messing up.
I saw that. We caught that too.
Good steal.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Okay. We now will go to item number 5, mayor's comments, and I believe I do have some comments. I hope I can get to the right page here. Good, okay. City employee recognition. Oak Harbor Senior Planner Dennis Lefevre was recognized by the Washington State Recreation Conservation Office for his service on the Boating Programs Advisory Committee since 2016. This is a well-deserved recognition. Thank you, Dennis. Oak Harbor School District presentation, Superintendent Michelle Casaibula will join us for our first meeting of the new year, January 3rd, to provide information on the district's planned February bond request, upcoming city offices closures. City offices will be closed on Monday, December 26th, in observance of Christmas Day, and on Monday, January 2nd, in observance of New Year's Day. Community events are displayed here. Just a reminder that the center will host a holiday lunch on Tuesday, December 20th at 12 noon. Cost is $20 per member or $30 for non-members. Register by Friday, December 6th by calling the center online. And so I will then turn to council for comments, but I think before we do that, I'd like to announce that the council has, at this point, would have no pressing business scheduled for the December 14th workshop meeting, and we are recommending that that workshop be canceled. Staff is recommending that. So if council feels differently, please let us know right now if you feel like you want to have a workshop. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Heisen.
Since the meetings are scheduled via ordinance, do you need a motion to cancel the workshop, or?
Yes, I think that would be the best way.
So I would entertain a motion to cancel that workshop.
I move to cancel the December 14th workshop.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Heisen, second by Councilor Munns, to cancel the December 14th, 2022 workshop. Seeing no questions or input, all in favor signify by raising your right hand, please. That passes unanimously. Thank you. So now I'll turn to council for, yes, Councilor Wiesner for comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just glad to see you guys two stick around. You know, merit badges will make you do things that you wouldn't normally want to do, but you're going to find out later in life that sometimes some of it comes in handy. Do you know how many years you guys, your troops, been doing the Wreath projects? Well, it's more than 50, because 50 years ago I was where you're at, handing out those wreaths. And in fact, it was my dad and I who built the shed there out back that you guys do store a lot of the stuff in for the wreaths. So just wanted to thank you guys for taking the time to present it. It's always something I look forward to each year. It brings back some great memories. Thank you.
50 years ago. My gosh. That's cool.
You watch your mouth.
Councilor Munns.
You could be a Boy Scout when you were 3 back then.
Thank you, Mayor. And I also like to thank your troop. I have a beautiful wreath. I have picked it up probably for the last 25 years. So my son was also in that troop. So it's very great. I had the pleasure of attending the Navy League monthly meeting, and today they had Captain David Harris, known as Rooster, as our speaker. He's in charge of the Growler Wing. He's the Commodore for all the squadrons, the training squadron and stuff. And he made an announcement today that there's been a rumor that the 5 expeditionary squadrons are staying. They are not leaving. They were trying to slim some budget. And just to give you context, there are 9 air wing squadrons with 200 personnel per squadron. There are 5 expeditionary, which means they go somewhere on land, and they recently went to Germany once Russia went into Ukraine. So they are very vital, and there are 205 personnel per squadron. Right now, there are 11,100 working population, 9,000 military, and 2,100 government civilian. And he just said that they are trying to get higher cost of living for everyone because our Whidbey Island is very expensive. And sometimes it takes a while for things to catch up. I know when we lived in Japan and the yen rate went up and down, we had to pay for everything in yen, except for on base. There were a lot of people that had to get loans from Navy Relief Corps. And so, but there are people living in Darrington and Bellingham, Bremerton that travel to work because they can afford a house there. So anything we can do. But he said they are also lobbying to raise their cost of living that they receive with their pay. So, and the other thing is Help House. Our local North Whidbey Help House is putting out food baskets again. They start on the 19th of December and go through the 22nd. It's a full meal deal, whether you're one person or you have 10 in your family. So any funds or things you can think of to drop by, they can take $5 and make it seem like 20. But they're also looking for stable items, any proteins, canned meats, stews, things like that, cereal, peanut butter, and oatmeal of any kind. Whether you pour it in a cup and add hot water, or it's the old-fashioned kind that takes you 20 minutes to cook it. So this will help us for January and February to fill the food baskets then. So anything would be appreciative. And remember, everybody needs to eat, and I would appreciate any donations. So that's it. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Other council comments? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week, I had an opportunity to attend the NAS Whidbey open house that they had at the Officers Club, and it was really well attended. The food was excellent. I was happy to see a number of department heads and city officials there, and the CEO of the base, Captain Hanks, he made a point to thank the city for showing up and having some representation. He had some of his own bigwigs in attendance, and he was really pleased that there were so many of us there, and just really highlighted the fact that we're not siloed, that we are a community, and the guests that he had were they could tell that by the interaction, the fact that we all knew each other, the fact that we had department heads there in attendance, and and they were also impressed. So just it's always fun whenever we get to kind of see that partnership in action and see how appreciative all sides of it are. So that was a lot of fun. And then Saturday there was the downtown tree lighting on Pioneer Way, and that was a lot of fun. I got to welcome the audience and count down to the lighting of the tree, since Mayor Bob couldn't be in attendance, and Councilor Stuckey was also there. And it was the best attended tree lighting I can remember ever attending. And Margaret Livermore, the president of the Downtown Merchant Association, or the Main Street Association, said the same thing. There were hundreds of people out, hundreds of them. I've never seen anything like it. It was very, very cool, and I just want to thank the Main Street Association, all the downtown merchants. They always find a way to be festive and have safe activities, and it was just really, my face hurt from smiling by the end of the evening, because it was just so great to see so many people out there and so many kids, even though it was freezing. The fire department got Santa there in great style, as always, and it's just always nice to see the community come together. So thank you to everybody who attended and made that happen. It was a beautiful event.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Other council comments? Any other? Yes, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
During council comments, quite often I will, speak to the public that's out there listening. I will concur with what all the other council members said about it being nice to see so many people in the audience. Super nice to see the Boy Scouts here. But I think it's a worthwhile time to take time to direct a couple comments to council. Among the current council here, this is the best I've seen a council working together in a long time. And I appreciate each and every one of you, and let's keep it up.
Thank you, Councilor Hoffman. Yes, Councilor Muntz.
Two more things. The Yacht Club sponsored the Boated Light Parade. There were 13 boats in it, and it seemed to be perfect weather for it. And I took a trip representing Island Transit down to Palm Springs last week to see hydrogen-fueled buses and some of their others. So that's pretty exciting, and we're looking to see on the island for the transportation what kind of buses we're going to go for and this and that. So it was very interesting and much warmer than it was here, I must say. But, and the expanded scheduling is working, and the on-demand for the military base for the workers to get to and from. So things are moving along there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Muntz. Any other council comments? Okay, thank you for those. We'll move back to our agenda item number 6A. This is continuation of public hearing, ordinance number 1959, critical areas ordinance code amendments to OHMC sections 1925, 1931, and 2012. And for this evening, I believe we have our senior planner, Dennis Lefebvre. Dennis?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you certainly do. And good evening, Council. This is the next step for our review of the critical areas ordinance, which we've been actually taking a look at for a number of months now and continuing the hearing accordingly. I do have a very brief PowerPoint presentation that I will share. And what I'd like to do is just kind of go through briefly the steps that we've taken to get to this point. We had a workshop discussion on these proposed critical areas in July. We scheduled a public hearing in September to discuss pretty much specifically the setback from a steep slope, unstable slope situation, and also the density transfer from the privately owned tideland portions of lots. We had some concerns raised at that public hearing, which prompted us to continue this discussion to the October 18th public hearing, where staff presented a compromise of what was being proposed at the September 6th meeting. Again, there was some council discussion on the reduction of flexibility in both of those cases. So it was continued to a discussion item as the part of the November 16th workshop. As directed by council at that workshop, what staff has done is reworked the ordinance that's part of your packet tonight to essentially allow 100% density transfer from privately owned tidelands to the upland portion of the same lot, and also allow primary structure development basically up to the edge of the bluff, but in both cases being supported by a geotechnical analysis. So that's what's being presented by staff this evening as part of your ordinance 1959. This is, of course, the continued public hearing from both September and October meetings. Essentially, what the ordinance does identify is 4 sections of our code that will be amended. The first 2 is for the first one's a density calculations. 2028-030 is for the building setback. We're going to maintain the 25 feet, which is already in code, but we're going to allow that flexibility to go within that 25 feet based on the geotechnical analysis. The other 2, the titles 21, are basically that we're not going to allow subdivision of tidelands. So, and that's a pretty standard amendment for our code. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I think this follows along with council direction that was given at the November workshop. I've crafted a recommended motion if you so choose to move forward with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Before we turn to council, I'd like to open the public hearing again at this time and confirm with our clerk whether we've received any public comments regarding this item.
Mayor, we have not received any public comments.
Okay. And then I'll also turn to the audience here tonight to see if anybody wishes to speak to this that's in our audience, and it doesn't look like they're running to the podium. So I will now close the public hearing, and we'll turn to the council for questions. Or maybe they're ready for a motion. Yes, Councilor Evans.
Thank you, Dennis, for putting up with us and getting this in line. I do appreciate that. And if there are no other comments, I'll be happy to make a motion. You have a comment?
We can
make the motion. Okay. I move to adopt ordinance number 1959, amending Oak Harbor Municipal Code, sections 20.12, general critical areas regulations, 20.28, geologically hazardous areas, 21.10, subdivisions and general provisions, and 21.50, subdivisions and general design standards.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to adopt the action, or to follow the action presented by staff. Reads exactly like that suggested motion. That motion was made by Councilor Evans, second by Councilor Hoffmeyer. And so we'll turn to the council for questions. Councilor Stuckey.
I do have a couple questions. One, the Planning Commission, did they have any comments on these items?
No, Councilman. They actually recommended the first version that you saw with the additional setback requirement and the restriction on density transfer.
So they recommended the 50% density transfer?
They recommended no available transfer of density.
So they wanted no. So they recommended no available transfer of density.
That's correct.
Uh-huh. How many do we have any idea how many properties, and I'm speaking about the transfer of density, do we have any idea how many properties this would affect?
On a real assist, but on just a general review, I'd say there's probably between 5 and 10 properties that this potentially could affect, but it's hard to say because there's always a redevelopment possibility as well down the road.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we had a lot going on in that workshop. And again, I've reviewed a little bit more, and I just want to make sure we're all on board with 100%, not 50%. We are going against what the Planning Commission says, which is our prerogative, but we're going 100% against our Planning Commission has suggested to us. Not that we have to go with that, of course, but just be aware we are going counterintuitive to what they suggested. 50% was offered as a compromise. That being said, it doesn't affect a lot of properties, just things for the council to consider. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Dennis, if I understand correctly, we allow for 100% transfer on wetlands, correct?
In the buffer area, yes.
In the buffer area, okay. The other question I had is there some kind of level, I'm a little concerned about level of liability for going against our planning commission and the consultant. Let's just say theoretically, I don't know if I can even do that. If we built the house 25 feet from the setback and it falls in, is there some level of liability? Because the consultant said 50 feet and the planning commission agreed to the 50 feet.
Well, I'm a little bit on a slippery slope here, but I would say that with support of a geotechnical analysis, that would give us some help, but I would defer the rest of the question to our attorney, if she's available.
And then Blaine, did you have?
That would be the same recommendation. I think when you start talking about liability issue, we get difficult on that issue, but our city attorney is probably the most proficient on answering that question. So if Hillary Evans, our city attorney, is available, I would open up and let her provide further clarification.
I did not hear the question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and repeat it. There's a question, Councilmember, you want to go ahead and do it, or? Okay. We're discussing the slope, and one of the questions here, and using the density for the tidelands, and the question here presented by Councilmember Marshall was that what is the liability issue that we have with going against the recommendations of other municipalities around us, or the county, and going against the Plan Commission? And Dennis did a good job of kind of deferring it as a kind of general issue. But I think
we certainly don't have to follow suit. Your planning commission is a recommendatory entity. They make a recommendation to you. There's no liability not following their logic or following their recommendation. So those are the other restrictions surrounding you. There's no binding, there's nothing binding in any of the decisions, just providing the context.
So we've got a couple of questions now that have still come up. We'll go to Councilor Munns and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Because there is a geotech survey, study, whatever, and they certify it and stamp it, to me, that is better than just saying 25 or 50 feet. If they don't have that. Now, if someone chooses just to do it on their own, you know, the city can't be liable for either one of those.
And I don't disagree with that. However, what we're asking is what the minimum setback is going to be. It was recommended that the minimum setback, recommended by the consultant and the planning commission and Mr. Lefevre, is that the minimum be 50 feet. And I'm not opposed to going under that 50 feet with a geotech survey and going all the way up to 0 feet with a geotech survey. But my concern is, where is our starting point? If our starting point is less than 50 feet, as recommended by the consultant and the planning commission, does that set us up for liability? Because anything at 26 feet, we don't need a geotech, is what we're saying. And so if the bluff erodes and that house goes, and then they turn around and look at the city and look at the recommended setback was 50 feet, the planning commission recommended 50 feet, and then we didn't adhere to that, I'm just wondering, does that open this council up for liability?
Okay, so, yes, I'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Heisen next.
Yeah, I honestly, I was surprised when I saw this. I supported the going under 50 feet if it was supported by a geotech. I was surprised to see the setback moved back to 25 feet. I was under the impression, based on the conversation we had, that the setback was 50 feet, but could be up to 0 with support, with geotech support. So, and I also, yeah, and I'm also more comfortable with the 50-50 credit language, unless supported otherwise by geotechnical analysis. So frankly, I mean, I don't know, unless I was completely checked out at that meeting. I was at that meeting, and I don't recall an overwhelming direction. I mean, there were some council members that wanted a smaller setback or 100% titled, or sorry, density transfer. But I was under the impression that we were sticking with the 50-50 and the 50-foot setback, unless supported by geotech analysis otherwise. And personally, that's what I would be more comfortable with. Thank you.
So our setback, according to our code, has been 25 feet for a very long time. The recommendation to move to 50 feet was brought to us by the department, and I asked the question of where that 50-foot number came from, and he acknowledged that it was an arbitrary number. That's why we're back at 25 feet, because there was no reason for the 50 feet in the first place. It was just an arbitrary number. The thing is going from 25 feet to 50 feet without cause, then we're taking people's property. That's my concern. So to make that change just arbitrarily doesn't make sense to me. And having a geotech involved with anything less than that makes complete sense, because they're the scientists of the earth, and we're going to have to trust them. So, my thoughts.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you. Dennis, first off, congratulations on your recognition. And Secondly, a couple of questions. Isn't the IBC regulation that there's a geotech study required anything less than 50 feet anyhow?
I'm sorry, Counselor, I can't answer that one. I don't know the IBC.
Well, because the way this reads, right, is that the setback shall be a minimum of 25 feet from the top of the steep or unstable slope unless a larger setback is recommended by a geotech analysis. So I guess my question is, what is the trigger for a geotech analysis? I think in most areas, the geotech analysis, even though the minimum setback could be 25 feet, the geotech analysis is typically triggered by a distance that's a little bit more than that. So I guess that's something I'd like to maybe, if we need to clarify. And then when this was presented to the Planning Commission, my assumption is, and correct me if I'm wrong, my assumption is that the initial proposal that came forward, the first wording of this ordinance that came forward that was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission, I'm assuming that was the language that was presented to the Planning Commission for recommendation. In other words, the Planning Commission didn't necessarily deviate from the recommended language at the start.
That's correct. The 25 feet is what we have in code at this point in time. We had that residential bluff conservancy study done. The consultant came back and based on his analysis of, I'll say, sea level rise, the 50-foot setback from the top up would be a safer distance. So 50 foot into play. His take on the density transfer was that it's just highly unusual and it's not done in other jurisdictions within our region. So, and at this point in time, our code allows 100% transfer of density as it stands now. I don't think I'm pretty sure there's no wording in there that would require a geotechnical analysis on the upland portion that's taking that extra density. So that's where we're adding that little extra piece of security for us. I hope that helps set the table a little bit better.
And then that really does. And understand the reason for these questions are purposeful. We are listening to the Planning Commission, and we understand that, there may feel like there's a disconnect there, and we don't want it to feel like that. And we want to make sure that they understand that we do listen to their recommendations, but we also want to understand when, they've come forward maybe with a recommendation, and let's face it, part of the makeup of this council and part of the makeup of the Planning Commission and the diversity that we have is somewhat purposeful in small towns. This is all part-time for us, right? We all have a full-time job and something that we maybe have a little more knowledge on than others. So just like the Planning Commission, we sometimes come up with different ideas and different tacks and different ways to look and discuss something. And what I'm trying, I guess, to get at here is, whether or not the Planning Commission, caught on to the discussion of different concepts outside the recommendation, and whether that conversation, took place, because obviously it takes, somebody to come up with the idea to have that conversation, to spur it forward, and not always is that something like that going to come up just in conversation if somebody didn't think of it, right? And so, I guess what I'm getting at is, if I'm not going to follow, a volunteer commission that we have asked to, analyze this stuff, it's recommendation, I want to make sure that I understand under, what grounds I'm doing that. And sometimes what comes before us is a recommendation, and we just don't see that there's other options out there, and we don't pursue that and discuss that. And if that's the case, I certainly feel a lot more comfortable, moving forward, understanding that we're doing so on something that is not necessarily what the Planning Commission recommended. So with that long explanation, Dennis, again, my assumption is that this was kind of a bullet point discussion with them. There was a recommendation recommended. They, discussed the merits of that recommendation and moved forward with the recommendation. And maybe didn't discuss options outside of the recommendation. Would that be a correct assumption?
I think that would be fairly accurate, yes.
All right, thank you.
So we do have a motion and a second. Yes, we've got more questions. So Councillor Stuckey?
Am I correct on the assumption that if you currently have a development in progress, you could not take advantage of these changes? Is that correct?
Yes, I would have assumed that that project has been vested under the laws at that time, that a complete application has been deemed complete. So that vests the project, and they can't take advantage of the new ordinances.
And we already, and if I heard you correctly, with the 100% density transfer, that's the one I'm more concentrating on, with the 100% density transfer, that's currently how our code reads. It allows currently for 100%. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Ready to vote? Okay, and you're all familiar with the motion, exactly like it was recommended? Okay, all in favor signify by raising your right hand. All opposed, same? Okay, that passes 5-2. 5 yes and 2 no. Okay, thank you, council. Let's move on to our next item, which is item number 8A. Under contracts and agreements, we have 2 items this evening. The first is the Whidbey Golf Course Agreement. And I know we have, yes, we have our project manager, Brett Arvidsson. Brett, welcome.
Good evening. Good evening, Council. I'm Brett Arvidsson. Here we go. We're here to talk about the Whidbey Golf Course. This is a revised drainage agreement. If you remember last April, we authorized the mayor to sign a 3-way drainage agreement with Whidbey Golf Course in Island County. This authorization was contingent on the approval of all parties. And unfortunately, Island County subsequently declined to approve the agreement. The golf course did renegotiate with Island County and developed an alternative agreement. We decided that we didn't want to enter in this agreement because of cost control considerations. We wanted something that's more itemized. So in lieu of a 3-way agreement, the golf course will contract separately with both the city and the county. This new agreement was developed with the original contract conditions basically, but it's now in a 2-party format. To go back to the original history of this contract, the original contract was executed in 2002. It was between the golf course and Island County ourselves. It contained provisions for maintenance of stormwater facilities in the golf course drainage basin. This drainage basin is a large drainage basin that eventually discharges into Swan Lake. It's about 2,500 acres with approximately 495 acres within city limits. This agreement did expire on March 31st, 2022, but we've been operating with the old agreement. Here's a map of the drainage basin. It's actually quite large. It goes all the way up to Monroe Road, up there by the drive-in theater. The green part is what's in the city, and I'll go into a little more detail on that. Eventually, it does drain down the ravine to Swan Lake and to the south. The scope of the original agreement contained provisions for operating and maintaining stormwater facilities, which are mutually beneficial to the city, the county, and the golf course. There are the facilities include the pump station, Lawler's Pond, some smaller ponds there, conveyance ditches, and the main drainage way. And this drainage way is called a ditch, but it's actually a stream, and it's actually a natural resource designation for fisheries. The golf course does maintain the ponds, the drainage way, and the stormwater pump stations. And these serve areas beyond the limits of the golf course. These are necessary to serve both housing there. If we did that, we would to avoid flooding of homes, and we have some elevation capacity limitations there. They also done some limited downstream maintenance on the downstream portion below the golf course. That gets to be a bit of a bottleneck there, so keeping it clean is helpful. So this is a more detailed map of the site in the city. You see these red areas. There are quite a bit of unincorporated areas which are actually within city limits, so those are county. Let's see if I can get a picture here. Oops, sorry. Pointer here. So the pump station is right here. So the flow comes across Fort Nugent from the south, comes across or enters Lawler's Pond, then kind of drains across this way, then down out that way. Like I say, there is quite a bit of structure in there, and the pump station is a pump station. So the scope of the original agreement, we did a cost flow calculation based on the amount of flow. We paid over the last 20 years 56% of the operating costs and any operating costs or any potential capital expenses. Good labor, materials, electricity is a big one, pump maintenance, and equipment replacement. We bought new pumps last year. Generally, these expenses were billed annually and they are carried in our stormwater budget. Our new agreement, the basic structure remains in place, the basic cost structure. We're still paying the 56%. Of course, the city and the golf course will now be the contract with the county operating under a separate agreement. The contract terms have been shortened from 20 years to 10 years. That gets to be a little cumbersome at that long a time. They have updated the labor rates and equipment rates, and we are initiating quarterly billing just for cash flow purposes. And we've added some additional language about operational reliability. We have developed an expense sheet, Exhibit D of the contract. The costs will include annual operating costs. We have some periodic expenses and capital improvements. The periodic and capital improvements, the capital improvements and the periodic expenses require pre-approval before expenditure. While we have capital expenses identified, they may or may not be needed. They require further study. If a capital expenditure is approved, the city requires 2 years to put the project into our stormwater budget. Right now, this agreement does not present a major cost increase over existing expenditures. So we have a recommendation to move that the City Council authorize the mayor to sign the joint drainage agreement between the City of Oak Harbor and the Whidbey Golf Course. Questions?
Thank you, Brett. Before I turn to council, I'd like to confirm with our city clerk that we've got no input from the public.
That's correct, Mayor. We've received no input on this item.
Okay, and then offer that same opportunity to those with us tonight. If anybody's got any questions, this would be the time, okay?
We have some representatives from the golf course here.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm John Jaragatellis, President of Whidbey Golf Club. And I'd just like to thank the Public Works folks here at the city. We've been working with them for a year and a half now to get what we thought would be a pretty easy contract signed. But thanks for their patience when the county dropped out, and it's been a pleasure working with you guys.
Thank you. Nice comment there. Thank you. Okay. No other council or no other public comment? I'll turn to council. Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Arvidsson, I do have a couple of concerns, and let me just tell you what they're surrounding, and maybe you can, tell me not to be concerned about it. But the county not being part of this agreement, right? Because the reality is there's three players here. There's the city, the golf course, and the county. And this is a fairly unusual situation in the state of Washington, because, we've got stormwater and Phase 4 environmental that we have to deal with. And we've got, county water that flows into the city. And, where does the city take responsibility for the flow and the containment in that flow? And then, of course, it flows out of the city back into the county. And then, of course, as you had pointed out, a large contributor to this is the basin that is county owned. And so when I don't see them involved in this agreement, it makes me be a little concerned, because obviously without their participation on the end conveyance, and I understand, if my memory serves me correctly, because you guys, gentlemen are correct, tons of patience. This has been going on for a long time, something that should be pretty simple. But if I remember right, there was some concerns about, the Swantown tide gate and, some maintenance and some costs, involved in it. And, that's ultimately where this conveyance leads to is Swan Lake. And so by not having the folks who contribute a large amount to this and then are responsible for the end conveyance not be part of the agreement between the two of us, we can all be good, right? But if they're not good, we all have a problem. So help me understand that.
Well, that is, one is we went through the negotiations, the Swantown issue came up, and it's a conveyance issue that the county is responsible for. We as, and our attorney can maybe clarify this, we as an upstream contributor operate under the common enemy clause in the state law. And what happens is all developments that we do within the city go through detention. So we're not putting out more water pre and post detention. So the amount of water we send out is constant. So under the common law doctrine, that our water needs to be conveyed just because it's a natural water course. So the tide gate was an issue, but it's specifically a county issue, and this agreement really has no impact to it because that's eventually where it goes, and that's under the common law doctrine. That's how you handle it. So yeah, it was some conversation regarding that, but basically it's not something that should be part of this agreement because it's not pertinent to that conversation.
Well, I guess my concern is it is somewhat pertinent because, we're committing to 56% of the cost of handling this water. And if the third party that's not signing on to this agreement decides to do something to stop allowing that water to convey or something, and we then found out that we had to provide a different conveyance, we'd be responsible for 6% of that conveyance.
That, under the common law doctrine, the downstream users are responsible to convey the water across their property. And that's, that you just can't dam off the creek and say you can't take it anymore. We are responsible if we increase the flow. That's why we do detention in these facilities. But it's a natural water course, and all we're trying to do is make it operate more efficiently. A lot of our cost is in the pump station and the actual facilities that are required to take it up. So the biggest cost of that is the ditch going across the property and the pump station. So yeah, we're responsible for 56% of the cost, but that's the cost that the golf course pays.
Well, and thanks for helping me understand this, and you get my concern.
Yeah,
right? There's three players here, and we're missing one of them. So just one last question, just to make sure I understand this. Now, of course, we're doing on-site stormwater retention. Right. That's a regulation within our city. It's not currently a regulation in the county.
That is between then the county and their downstream users. That's where they have liability. That we are not party to that approval.
So if the county for some reason decided that there was going to be a ton more water diverted, from that basin, because under current code, that could, right? that.
Actually, under the common law doctrine, any property owner could come back and say, you're increasing the flow and impacting my property, which is common. That's why we do enforce detention on our facilities, because we can cause downstream damage.
Okay, and I know I said that was the last question, but this is really the last question. I just assumed that we tried everything we could to have all three people involved in the one agreement, and we just finally got to the point where this is where we have to go.
Yeah, I feel this is the best way to head with it. We felt that their cost approach, we wanted to be very clear about what we're paying for and not paying for, and responsible for the public's money, and they just wanted to throw a check. And so we kind of felt this was a better way to go. And I think, I had concerns personally about the three-way agreement, but looking back, I think it's the best thing we can do.
All right. Thanks for that, and thanks for being here to back him up, Steve.
Yeah, and may I add one thing, Councilmember?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, just kind of related to your comments, you're right, and so I am new Public Works Director, and so you're right, part of it is that I took a look at this also, and just to be public about it, so council will know, and you know this as I'm looking at, one, I'm looking at it with fresh eyes, but two, it's my job to look at this and represent the city's interest. So I would always ask the question in any agreement is, one, does the city need to pay anything at all? And that's what I looked at this. And so I took a new look at it and I said, maybe our interests are to pay less. And I took an independent, separate look at it and said, you know what, this agreement evenly divides the cost, I think, very appropriately. The agreement has some very good things. We've kind of changed how the billing is done and made some slight improvements. So I fully support where we're going forward, which is basically what we've been doing for a number of years. And so just so you know, as a new person coming in, I felt that this cost-sharing split was very appropriate for each of the parties.
Councillor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. I know the first time this contract came at us, I think it might have been your first week even, somewhere around there. So it's encouraging to hear that you've had some time to look at it. One of the comments made was, if there were increased water flow, that then we would be responsible for that. So my first question would be, looking at this map, it seems very clear that the Marion Woods project and the Gary Oaks project both would tie into that same drainage basin.
Both have retention.
They both have retention?
Yes.
So none of the property outflows property at all?
Huh?
No.
Basically, when we design detention is we do it under the principle of pre and post flows. So the post-development flow is the same as the pre-development flow.
Gotcha.
So there's no net change. So again, we don't trigger the common law doctrine.
Okay. Next question is the capital projects. Who gets to decide when those capital projects are needed or if they are?
Eventually, the council does because they have to be brought into the budget. So we will put them through our normal capital process and you'll get an explanation of them.
And now, the final thing I have here is, the last time this was brought to us, we were led to believe that it was pretty straightforward and nobody in this building necessarily knows what the county is thinking ahead of time. I will say that, that night after we passed that agreement, we spoke with two county commissioners, and both of their opinions were that we had possibly signed on to something that would leave us liable for 56% of a $8 million tide gate. And what I was told by them was, don't worry, we're going to bail you out in the morning and vote this down, which they did. They did vote it down. I don't know if that was right or wrong, and I don't really care to relitigate that. I'm comfortable voting for this if the Public Works Director and our legal counsel agrees that we are in no way potentially liable for that tide gate.
I would never make that promise to you, but I've looked at the contract and I approve of it.
Councillor Stuckey.
Yeah, before I ask a couple questions, did you still have something to say?
I wanted to make a comment if that's okay.
Is it okay with everybody if he? Okay, go ahead. And then I do have some follow-up questions.
I wanted to set the council's minds at ease. We already have a signed contract with the county in the actual working to do with the water movement, the drainage agreement. All those parts are exactly the same as they were. The only thing the county changed is the accounting, how they pay, and that the accounting is what they didn't agree with, the way the city does it versus the county. But their liability and who's moving the water and notifying us of new developments, all that is exactly the same as it was. So you can set your mind at ease. There's no surprises in there.
Thank you. Looking at this agreement you printed off compared to the one that was in there, I'm looking at the specific project estimates on here, which, $500,000 for renovating a pond dam, $250,000 for another one, and here it just has TBD for, it makes sense, but $500,000, is that a realistic?
We haven't studied it, so we have put some numbers out. That's what I'm saying is they do require quite a bit of study, and then we're not sure if we'd even want to get involved with them. We haven't seen whether it benefits the city or not. So while we've reserved the ability to participate in it, we have the ability to study it and come back at a later date and say we want to get involved or not get involved.
Okay, so I was looking at,
Yeah, like I
big
said-
numbers are a little scary sometimes.
That was, we looked at that, there was some negotiation on that. Our team kind of felt we didn't want to get involved, but we decided, well, we'll take a look at it if it does make some benefit to us. And but right now, I could say it's going to take a while to get there.
That's good to hear. My other question is, this might be for our finance director. Do we know the last few years, the average amount paid to the Whidbey Golf Club, excluding any capital projects?
I don't have that right now, but I could certainly look it up.
It's been in the order of $8,000 to $10,000 a year.
8 to 10, okay.
It really depends on electric bills and when something breaks down or that sort of thing. So, and their labor, how often they clean, if they clean the
Sure.
channel every other year or something like that. So, generally electricity runs $3,000 to $4,000 a year.
Okay, not that every penny doesn't count. It does. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but hearing 8 to 10,000 on average, I'm not going to hold you
Yeah,
to
no,
it.
it-
Makes me feel a little more confident than if you said, "Oh, it's been 50 to 60,000 every year for the past 10 years." So
Yeah, we actually, if you look at Exhibit D, we do have an estimate of.
sure,
of-
I did see the estimate. Yeah, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Questions? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Heisen.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign the joint drainage agreement with Whidbey Golf and Country Club.
Got a motion in a couple of seconds. I'll give the motion to Mayor Pro Tem, of course, and I'll give the second to Councilor Munns. And the recommended action is just exactly like it reads in the packet. Authorize the mayor to sign the agreement. Any other input or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Brett. And I see you're still at the podium. So we will move on to item number 8B. Item number 8B is city, and thank you from the golf course. Thank you for your patience. Yep. Keep your eye on the ball. Item number 8B is City of Oak Harbor Marina Dredging Project, Professional Services Agreement with Moffat and Nichols, Inc. And we again have Brett Arvidsson.
Okay, City Council, I'm back again. Here to talk about a marina dredging project. Talk background of this, we operate the Oak Harbor Marina, and it requires dredging of the sediments on a periodic basis. The marina was last partially dredged in 2010. We weren't able to dredge the whole marina. Dredging requires engineering services for designing the project. Additionally, dredging requires in-water permits from both state and federal agencies, and these are not easy things. An FDOC took us a year and a half to get, and it was relatively simple. Due to the specialized nature of this, we intend to use a consultant for that, and the consultant work will be divided into 4 phases. First phase involves preparing a feasibility study. Second phase, once we decide on that, is a preliminary design, a permit package preparation. We'll do final design and the actual construction period services. This is not a quick project. It'll take 3 to 4 years and possibly longer. I was just out visiting Mariners Cove. They're dredging their harbor now, and they were 7 years in the process. So it's not a simple process to go through. This is a picture of the dredging area. Basically, our main channels and our main area there. We do have a barge along the south boom there that has to be pulled out too as part of our DNR permit, so we'll take care of that at the same time. This is FDOC ground. Last spring we had a very low tide, and Chris gave me a call and went out there, and actually FDOC was sitting on the bottom at this, so you kind of see the handrail there bent over, so that our dock was actually sitting on the bottom right there, so it's being supported by our new handrail, which was a little bit worrisome at the time, but everything was okay. Anyway, we went through a consultant selection process. We solicited proposals from 17 qualified firms from the MSRC process. We had 3 firms submit proposals. We went through a selection process, evaluated the proposals, and we actually interviewed all three firms. All three were excellent. Moffat Nichol was selected on the basis of their team firm qualifications, ability to implement the projects in a timely fashion, and knowledge of Oak Harbor. They have done work for us in the past. So the initial scope of work, as I said, is a feasibility plan. This plan will include reviewing the historical data. We have to do a hydrographic survey. We have to do an initial sedimentation analysis, do a disposal site evaluation, prepare dredging quantities and also look at alternatives for that, do a regulatory assessment and permit strategy and project management, and also plan on some public presentations in this. Another consideration will be the long-term strategic planning of the marina, such as now there's some discussion of dock reconfiguration. This may be brought into the study as it impacts us, but right now it's not in our current scope of work. The final scope and cost of this project is dependent on the amount of sediment dredged. That's going to be a big issue. Complexity of working in the marina. We have to work underneath existing docks and with existing clients. Environmental mitigation, and that is a very large issue. We could be talking to $1 million to $1.5 million for this, so we need to work on reducing that down as much as possible. Disposal site availability, our cheapest alternative is to go to open water disposal. That's a function of our sediment quality, so right now we're hoping that we can do open water. We did last time. Funding availability and other factors. This feasibility study will evaluate these factors and recommend a path forward. We plan this thing to take, the feasibility to take about 6 to 8 months. Then once we get into the permitting and design, it's going to take 2 to 3 years, because I could say it's going to be a minimum 18 months to get to the permit, to the state with the permits. Construction does occur during in-water period. It's generally October to mid-February. So Moffat Nichol did provide a fee proposal to us. The fee for this feasibility plan is $189,271. This work will be performed on a time and materials basis not to exceed. And as we move forward, we'll engage future work with contract amendments. We do have a recommendation to move that the City Council authorize the mayor to sign a professional services agreement with Moffat Nichol Incorporated in the amount of $189,271 for the City of Oak Harbor dredging project. Questions?
Thank you, Brett. Before we turn to council with questions, I'd like to verify that we've gotten no input from the public.
That's correct, Mayor. We've received no input.
Thank you, Clerk Julie, and then turn to the audience if anybody wishes to speak to this. If not, okay, we'll go to council. Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Arvidsson, I'm just going to assume it's a misprint, but I just wanted to verify it because we're awarding a contract here. In our package, on page 122, it says, the selection committee's decision was based upon Gray and Osborne's staff firm qualifications, their project approach. And, okay, so it is Moffat and Nichols, Gray and Osborne's not part of this contract.
We actually grabbed an agenda bill from the last one you awarded, so.
And just because of that statement, I just want to verify, I'm assuming Moffat and Nichols was not the low bidder.
We are not allowed, we have to evaluate based on qualifications, then we negotiate with the preferred firm.
Okay.
So it's not a low bidder situation.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Stuckey.
I'm dredging what the final cost will be. Just 2 questions. This study, ARPA funds are going towards this, is that?
Yes, we are using $150,000 towards ARPA. Yes, Chris.
Yeah. And just so I have a better outlook, something like this, is this something like this ran by our Marina Advisory Committee at all?
Yes, that's part of the public presentation
Okay.
I talked about. We plan on presenting to them several times during the course of the project.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Couple questions. Originally, this dredging feasibility study was expected to cost $300,000, And, Counselor Stuckey's right, the 150 from ARPA going towards that was intended to cover half. So I guess this is a good news thing there in general. Is this all-inclusive? Is this everything that we had intended to be included in the scope of work?
For the feasibility study?
Yes.
And
Okay.
so coming out of the feasibility study, we will then develop our design and permitting strategy. So this just gets us to the first decision point.
Yeah, and going into it, if we knew it was going to be if we knew it was going to be 190,000, you probably would have had 95,000 out of ARPA going towards it. But again, this is a good news thing. So thank you.
Councillor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned that the docks may be reconfigured. At what process will you decide if we need to redo that plan?
So our marina is largely intact the way it was built in 1974. So as with all things with the marina, we'll start with the Marina Advisory Committee, and then I would imagine we'll do some public workshops at the yacht club or here or somewhere like that to get public impact. And then the final step of that would be to leverage off of a business plan that we're having written for us right now and see what the outcomes of that are, see what the boating trends are in that area, see where the revenue generating slips are in the marina and the non-revenue generating slips. One of the challenges, as I've shared with you guys before, is that 50% of our marina is 28 feet or less, which is a very small slip going by today's standards. The average boat size, a family boat, has switched from 1974 being 24 to 28 feet to nowadays being 36 to 50 feet. So there's a huge demand for those larger boats out there and not so much of a demand for the smaller slips. So it'll be a combination of many different things that we'll bring to you in the end for authorization.
Chris, then what we're paying for to figure out the dredging plan shouldn't affect if we reconfigure it to have larger slips then. It will just mean changing things around and extending, okay.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't at all because they'll decide on a depth for the whole marina. Last time it was -12, and I would suspect that it'll be in that same area this time. And that's the target for the whole marina as they work through and dredge it.
Is there someone checking to see what fish might be there? Because it was very disappointing to get started into a week or maybe two and then stopping us deciding that we needed another permit or, and they didn't give us any extra time. And then there was the fish. So I'm hoping it works out better.
Yeah, that's part of the, when I talked about the environmental permitting strategy is we're going to have to get all that lined up. We have some excellent permitting people who've worked for us before. But yeah, we're going to be dealing with the fish. We'll be dealing with the what do you call them, the little guys that run around. So that's we're going to have to send divers down. The sediment issues are huge. So there's quite a bit of environmental permitting to this. The engineering is actually pretty straightforward. You're just digging out the bottom. But the permitting part is where we start getting real complicated. And also the mitigation. As Chris talked about, some of our, if we do some reconfiguration, we may be able to get some mitigation credits for that too. So that's all kind of tied back into this package.
Well, I know we can definitely make money from it, but I know just people driving up to go smelting.
Yeah.
I mean, they come as far away as Tacoma. It's like a little United Nations. If you just go down there and sit, they come and they'll show you their buckets and what they've got, and it's just amazing how many people go there, maybe even more so than our park sometimes. So the word gets out, I don't know how, but anyway, it's just an amazing sight on how many people do come and walk the docks and fish and whatever. So I'm excited to see this continue. We are very lucky to have this gym in our city. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned long-term strategic planning, and so, my comment isn't necessarily germane to the actual recommended action, but, you know, I think that sooner than later, we're going to have to acknowledge that mortgage rates and fuel sales aren't realistically going to be able to sustain a facility this age that needs the amount of updating it does. So I would like to throw out there that we should seriously consider establishing a port district or looking into the logistics of doing so, because they would have access to lots of grants and funding opportunities that the city just can't access. So, you know, obviously this needs to be done. We'll do everything that we can to keep everything up to date as long as possible. But, you know, when you mention long-term, you know, this is basically a Band-Aid, and we're going to have to get creative when it comes to, you know, hanging on to what is really a gem in the city. So just throwing that out there. I'm going to do some more research on the Port District thing, but I would definitely like us to look into that possibility in the near future. Thank you.
Okay, any other council questions or input regarding this agenda item? Any motions? Yes, Councillor Munns?
Thank you. Yes, Mayor, I'll do it. It is like to move and authorize the mayor to sign a professional service agreement with Moffat and Nichols, Inc. for the City of Oak Harbor dredging project in the amount of $189,271.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Motion made by Councillor Munns, second by Councillor Hoffmeyer, and the recommended motion is the same as the recommended action in your packet. Seeing no other questions or input, all in favor signify by raising your right hand. It looks like that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. 2 for 2 there, Brett. Way to go. So at this time, I think that we are going to go into executive session, but I think we'll take a short break, and we'll get into executive session at about 7:35 or 7, let's make it 7:38, 39, 38. 7:38 will be an executive session. That gives you a 7-minute break. And then it is anticipated that it'll be a half-hour. Action may or may not be taken. The executive session is to consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase per RCW 4230 110 1B, and to discuss with legal counsel litigation or potential litigation per RCW 4230 110 1I. And again, that we anticipate that will be done in 1/2 hour. Action may or may not be taken upon return to the open session, and executive sessions, unfortunately, are not open to the public. So we'll see you at 7:38.
The council has determined they will be in executive session for an additional 15 minutes, returning at 8:23. Thank you. The council has announced they will extend the executive session for an additional 5 minutes, returning at 8:28. The council has announced they will extend the executive session an additional 5 minutes, returning at 8:33.
Yeah, it was good. So I would like to reconvene this general meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council, regular meeting, I should say, December 6th, 2022. We have been in executive session. No decisions were made in executive session. And I'll turn to council to see if there's any final business. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Got a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say, raise your right hand. And looks like it's unanimous. We are adjourned.